just going to chat. It's all good. We're sitting here. Hi, everyone. It's Ashley Koff, registered dietitian. Oh, I'm so excited about this topic today. These interviews for me are really selfish. I have topics that I want to, talk with these experts that maybe I've interacted with over time, but really dive deeply into what they're doing and helping how we can use their knowledge and work as better nutrition tools to help us get better results. So today's topic, feeding your genes, we're going to talk about culinary genomics. And so I want to welcome whether you are a healthcare practitioner, whether you are someone who's really interested on the culinary side, whether you're both of those, whether you're what we call an individual or a consumer, or, whether you're thinking about it for yourself or your family. Everybody here is welcome. And so what we want to do, we're going to go through sort of three phases. The first is going to be certainly an introduction to my guest, and then also an introduction to the language of genes and culinary genomics. I think that's really important so that we're all talking the same thing. If you have any questions as we go along, or you want to tell us where you're joining us from, or you want to tell us what's confusing you or bothering you, or any of those good questions, or even just your favorite meal, that's awesome. If you tell us the word better, if you comment better, you will be entered to win Amanda's new book, and she is giving away 10 of those. So I highly recommend commenting better. And the final piece is, this is just too complicated for us to cover in a half hour. It's not going to happen. So what we talked about is we're going to have Amanda back and we'll be able to have conversations, but she has a quick start guide, which is fantastic, and you can get that at thegenomicskitchen.com. She also, as I mentioned, has a book coming out, so you want to comment better. And then one of the things that I found just fantastic was she and her partner actually put together this incredible webinar. And it really, wow, talk about making things simple. I love analogies and really helping us walk through all of that. So without further ado, first to the Genomic Kitchen and its founder, Amanda Archibald. Hello.
Hey, Ashley. Awesome to be on with you.
I'm really excited. And I usually start off listing, and I could, this whole entire roster of all of your experience and so many exciting things. And people are going to just get all of that. And of course, they can also get that at your website. But I got to tell you, I ask everyone, just like I do for my podcast, and actually just like I do for my clients, I ask people a series of questions for a pre-interview. And one of them is always, what makes you laugh? And what is so fun for me, I don't know if you know this, but I actually wrote my college thesis on the difference between Americans and British citizens based on our senses of humor. And you wrote in there British sitcoms, so it blew me away.
You get it.
Yeah,
you get it.
Totally. So do you have a favorite? I wanted to know that. Anyone that you grew up with or just pops to mind?
It's so many of them I've kind of forgotten over the years. I mean, you remember Fawlty Towers, right?
With John Cleese. You gotta get Fawlty Towers, yeah.
Right. So I think a lot of Americans will think of John Cleese and, Fawlty Towers, which is still funny today. But I'm actually enjoying going back. I went to my first university was in Manchester, and there's this long-running series in England called Coronation Street, and it's totally light. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's in the back streets of Manchester, and it's all this drama and saga. I never looked at it for 30 years, but I was watching it in university, and all of a sudden now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's on Hulu.
Gotta go back.
I'm watching it. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this drama from the back streets of Manchester, but it's fun.
Yes, totally. I love it. So we highly recommend you check out your British humor, etc. And so I'm also going to do something that I don't normally do, but this was so compelling, what you wrote in the pre-notes. I'm actually going to use that by way of introduction. Then I promise we're going to actually dive into this. But Amanda said, I strongly believe in connecting nutrition science to the plate, also that the public can truly understand advanced ideas in nutrition science, provided that they are presented in ways and images that people can understand. We do the public a disfavor when we believe that they need simplistic ideas. I could not agree any more. And in fact, as we were just getting ready here, one of the things that Amanda and I were talking about is, so often the conversation is, we've got to meet the public where they are. As, practitioners, we've got to, talk to them a certain way or meet you. If you guys are watching this, it's like the same as when people tell me I should use a 3-cent word instead of a $10. Look, I like my $10 words, you know, so we're not going to talk down to you. We're not going to, but what we want to do is we want to help you understand this. And then really importantly, we want to arm you and empower you with information that can allow you to have a conversation with your healthcare practitioners. Because this is new. This is new. You know, I'm learning everything from Amanda. This is a new area, genetics, genomics, like the distinction, all of this is new. And so I think it's really important that this is not going to be oversimplified. It may not even go slowly, but the nice part is you can rewind, pause, you know, do any of that stuff, take notes. And, you know, we really do want to help you become that, empower you to be that better user of this tool, which is Culinary Genomics. Okay, long introduction. We're going to dive into it. So, there's a lot of conversations here. In your webinar, there's a fantastic description of, you know, everything from DNA to genes to the actual, like, 4 markers, actually starting with a chromosome, right? Chromosome, genes, etc. So I thought what we could do is have you share the definitions or go through the difference between genetics and genomics, and then let's talk about how our genes, how that chromosome actually creates a protein.
Okay, yeah, so let's start with genes. Let's start with why they're even important. So, you know, the way I explain it is that genes are the master directors of everything in the body. And the reason is because their principal job is to create proteins, right? So we know proteins in the form of, you know, building bones, building muscles, but proteins also come in the form of enzymes, which are critical to our biochemistry. Our body runs on biochemistry, and enzymes drive that biochemistry, right? So genes are important in that they produce these, basically the building blocks and the movers and shakers in the body. So that's why genes are important. So we often think of genes, when you hear the word of genes, you think of genetics, right? Mm-hmm. And genetics, of course, is the study of genes. Mm-hmm. And people think about genetic tests and say, oh my gosh, if I go and get a genetic test, is it going to predispose me to learning something that I'm going to die early, mm-hmm. right? So, and in some cases, people do have these aberrations in their genes. We call them mutations, which are life-threatening. And so that, when people hear about this new field of genomics and nutrigenomics, they think, oh, you know, early death, right? I'm going to find out about something that I don't want to know. So let's put that to rest, that indeed genes can become mutated. And those gene mutations occur among less than 1% of the population. They basically are life-threatening. They don't respond to lifestyle intervention, and they don't really respond to dietary intervention, and they need medical supervision. So there is that. And that's when you work with a genetic counselor, right, and experts who work with genetics. So that's one thing. But genomics is this powerful field that I'm working in, and that's really derived from the Human Genome Project that we like to say it was completed in 2003. And the Human Genome Project gave us this blueprint for how the human body is built. It helped us understand what the genes are, 22,500 of them, and we're starting to make progress on what each of them do, right? That's what's amazing. So what's interesting about genomics is we're learning how genes operate and what functions they direct, what part of your biochemical circuitry they direct. If you understand what part of the circuit a gene directs, then from a clinical perspective, we can find ways to intervene if the circuitry or our biochemistry isn't running fluently, right? And one of the ways that we can help our biochemistry run fluently is through food. So genomics is a study of what the genes are and how they operate, right? Mm-hmm. Nutrigenomics, which is where I work, and we'll get to culinary genomics. Nutrigenomics studies how the information provided by food interacts with our genes. So literally, we now know that different constituents in food, so different nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, and things we call bioactives, can turn genes on or off, up or down. This is extremely powerful because if you're someone who suffers from a lot of inflammation, or you've got these aches and pains and we can't get to the bottom of it, we can kind of literally sort of open up your genome, if you will, through testing and find out where some of the variants or aberrations are, where some of the circuitry is off, and we can look and say, potentially you may need more of this vitamin, or from food, we go with food first, or maybe not, or we can see these sort of misdirections in biochemical pathways that when we put together a picture, we can re-steer it, and that's done through food.
And even the form of the nutrient, when we get into that part. So one of the things I think is really interesting about the whole genetics, genomics piece is, often the question that we get is, are we a victim of our genetics? Or said differently, like, what's more important, genetics or environment? And if you include environment in terms of what you're eating, then I think, am I hearing you correctly to say actually you have the ability with genomics, with nutrigenomics, to bridge the two of those? Is that?
You can, and actually I sent you a paper this morning, and maybe you can kind of post that to your group. It's called "Do We Need to Think Differently About Genetics?" and it's by Joe Pizzorno. So Joe, you know him so well. His work in the toxin solution is brilliant. You absolutely have to get that book. It's written for the public, but us as clinicians too. It's an amazing read. And what he was talking about in that paper, which I think most folks would be able to read, is we're thinking about this all wrong. Genomics, he talked about genetics, but genomics is about food, but it's also about the environment. So when we have these variants in our genes that we call single nucleotide polymorphisms, that can change how the body responds to the environment and how it responds to stress and how it responds to food. So we literally, by controlling these inputs, controlling what we're exposed to, there was this, and let's go back to that. I posted something yesterday. Somebody had posted this great meme that said, we should be counting the amount of toxins and not the amount of calories. Because our environment is as hazardous to our genes as maybe some of the food choices we're making. And the emotional stress that we're living in and the isolation that we're living is as catastrophic to how our genes behave as poor food choices. So, I like thinking, maybe it's 80% food, but I want to say it's like a third, a third stress, a third lifestyle. Oh, maybe there's exercise in there, right, too? Food is the principal information, but our genes are washed by the environment that we live in. So you can have this perfect, organic, sustainable diet, but if you're using, toxic household products in your house, you're undoing the good work that food can do when we're massaging.
I think, like, what you're talking about too is where people, there's so many, they call it the prosumer, like there's so much movement today to really personalize your nutrition. And there are a lot of programs, testing, things like that try to personalize. But then they prescribe at a mass level. They prescribe like the same things across that part. And so I think one of the things I love about culinary genomics is actually really aligns with what we look at in overall as the Better Nutrition Program. I really see culinary genomics as one of those tools, because you really have to know where your body is. And one of the things that you talk about in there, and I'd love to have you present it, you have this acronym MEES, which is taken from mise en place, which, in cooking is, we always want to, it's something I never remember to do, but prep everything ahead of time. The French, make it seem so easy to be organized and all of that. So take us through what MEES is as it relates to culinary genomics. Yeah. So
let's just jump off. So for nutrigenomics, because we have to get to what's culinary genomics, right? So nutrigenomics is this field that we work in that looks at which nutrients, which foods contain this information to turn on and off specific genes. Depending on what we're trying to achieve, manage oxidative stress, manage inflammation, et cetera, we can use food to work with these genes. It's pure biochemistry, but it sits with genomics, right? So now we know, okay, we need to nip and tuck for you, so we can fine stream how your body's humming along. There are some culinary rules that go with this, right? And that's what culinary genomics is. It's the culinary translation of the nutrition information that talks to your genes. Or, as I say, it's cooking the language and flavor of your DNA. So
I love that.
Isn't that great? I mean, it is. It's like we can cook the language of your DNA. Now, yours may be nipped and tucked a little bit differently than mine, Ashley, but hey, maybe we should present our DNA one time, right?
I'm like,
isn't that cool? It's like, this is what I look like. This is what.
I will say, one of the things that you've just said, which I actually, it makes me feel so much better just as an individual, is when you were describing a SNP, single nucleotide, okay, we're talked about it, it's often talked about as a mutation. And that's
Right.
borrowing from the word of genetics. And it
Yes.
will always bother me because we know so many women today have the variation. We're not mutated, the variant where we don't metabolize folate the same way, right? And we're learning so much about that. Yeah. So that, just that one, like, just when you said that, like, it's so interesting how communication, instead of telling me that, like, I have a mutation in my genetics, which is the way that it was presented to me early on when, you know, when I had this testing done, instead it's like, oh, look at, you have this variant, you have this variant. Like, it's just information. So I share that with people where, like, I think your initial point was so powerful where it's like, knowing your genomics is about getting your playbook, like your personal playbook. Exactly. It's not about like knowing, you know, the serious things are important, but yeah, okay. Anyway,
we all have, so that's a really good point. So then we'll get to the kitchen and talk about me's. Yes. So I said that in less than 1% of these mutations, which can be life-threatening, so can predispose you to cystic fibrosis, for example. You know, some of the phenylketonuria, like it's one of the classics we all learned in school. Those are life-threatening. SNPs, these single nucleotide polymorphisms or little spelling errors on your genes, we all have them. Like 99.9% of it, we all have these SNPs. Once it determines your traits, right? It determines that you have dark hair, I have blonde hair, etc., brown eyes, blue eyes. So we know them as traits. Those traits are positive. But on your genes, we can apply the same idea of traits to how your genes operate, you know? And so what we look for clinically is how do these SNPs all line up in different pathways? And if they steer you, like in biotransformation or detoxification, my SNP, I don't have the great detoxification profile. I'm going to look through all my pathways, but I know what to do with food to prop them up. Right. So they're not life-threatening, okay? They can, you know, if we see them line up, we could say, you know what, we need to nip and tuck with food and some lifestyle, and you'll sail. You won't get diabetes. You won't get heart disease. So in other words, SNPs respond to lifestyle intervention. That's completely different from a mutation, right? And genomic testing allows us to look at this big blueprint and nip and tuck with food and personalize how you live and what you eat to your unique you. And it's the most powerful science in decades, right? It is life-changing for people. It's life-changing for us clinically or when we're working in nutrition practice. So all that to say, what culinary genomics is,
we got that.
Right? We walk all this into the kitchen. So I may look at Ashley's genomic information and say, we need to push and pull a little bit more on cruciferous vegetables, or Amanda does, because Amanda's thriving and she's happy, but her body said, we don't deal with the environment too well. So how can we make those genes work better, make the proteins they produce work more effectively? So we will focus in on like alliums. So your alliums may be onions, leeks, shallots, garlic, right? Or the allium family. And cruciferous vegetables are critical for all of us. But some of us have to push a little bit more on our plate to make our genes work for us. So this kind of information on how food talks to our genes is what's in the MISE, the ME's toolbox. And what I did is I took this huge field of science and said, how do I make this accessible to the everyday person without a genomic test? You know, whether you have one or you don't, that's what I'm trying to do, is change the plate and the landscape of how we understand food. So ME stands for master ingredients, influencer ingredients, superfoods, and the enablers. So let's describe what those are. So M, master. What we're looking at is we put very specific ingredients in the toolbox that work with what we call our master genes. These genes are responsible for turning on processes that help you manage oxidative stress, right? If you talked about that with your audience, Ashley, what oxidative stress is.
So I think we've talked about it a lot. We've talked about free radicals. We've also talked about the fact that oxidative stress can be the outcome of something that's very positive, you know, working out outdoors, etc. I think when people hear the word stress, they just automatically go to the negative and stress out a little bit. But we've talked about that for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. So So basically, we can turn on a pathway. So I think of it like a fire hose. So, we get antioxidants from our diet, but our body's brilliant. We actually can use food to turn on a much more powerful antioxidant production pathway that is like a fire hose versus a teacup if you're putting out a fire. So which one are you going to choose?
Yeah.
So oxidative stress is one of those, is a foundation of disease. So managing it is a foundation of wellness. Mm-hmm. So we prime, the M stands for the ingredients to help us turn on that pathway, but also turn off genes that are pro-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. So that's what's in there. Of course, I'm going fast here.
And we're totally good. So if we have master ingredients, and I love that we separate master ingredients from superfoods. So we're going to get into that distinction here.
Yeah.
If we have those master ingredients, I think it's really important for everyone to remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a lot of ways we can get ingredients in today. So remember, that's your total nutrition. That's your food, your beverages, your supplements. Yeah. So when you talk about plussing it up through food, you're talking about really in that total, depending on how somebody, what choices somebody needs to make or chooses to make, you still have to deliver it. I was talking to somebody the other day about it. We'll just put the word out there because keto, everybody's all excited about keto. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time judging keto, which actually I worked on when somebody had genetic mutations that they needed keto, right?
Exactly.
But
Correct.
what I said was you cannot keep your body from having these master ingredients. So what you're basically saying is if you are going to keto, your supplement game better be rock star in order to get in the nutrients. I don't know that it's possible long term, but a lot of people are doing keto for short term or at different points in time. But I just think it's an interesting moment to jump into that discussion and just explain that, you really can't get away from giving your body what it needs to run better. You can't.
Yeah, I respond to this on keto too. First of all, genomics will tell you whether you can deal with it or not.
Right.
Because otherwise you're guessing.
Yeah.
Okay. And we won't get into that. But regardless, your genes could not care less what your fad diet is.
Right.
They could care if it was keto, right?
Quote,
they just have the dog in the fight. They are genes, and they're there to direct human biochemical traffic.
Yeah.
There's no dog in the fight, whether it's whatever, specific carbohydrate diet, whatever, paleo, keto, no. And actually, I'm just looking here. There was a brilliant paper. It's called Hunter-Gatherers as Models in Public Health. And I think I posted it on one of my pages, just genius paper. They said, look, this is what we really know about how people eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they ate a lot of high fiber carbohydrates, which has fallen out of fashion. I'm not judging one way or the other, but going back to master ingredients, what I did is I looked at foods to optimize how our genes operate. And let's take it to an economic level. If you only have so much money to spend on food, this is where I would spend it. Put that away and spend it here, because what we want to teach people is how food functions in the body. So if you know that you get broccoli and you prepare it a certain way, it's going to optimize the information for your genes, make your cells, hum along beautifully, put your money there. And that's what master ingredients are. They're not exclusive. What we're trying to do is not be exclusive.
Right.
We're trying to be inclusive. But if you've only got so much money and so much time, put your money here, right?
Do you have, where would people get that list? Is that in the Quick Start Guide, or is that a
list on the site? It's in the Quick Start Guide, yeah. And the Quick Start Guide gives you, it's really where kind of getting back into the conversation I'm talking about, some definitions, how your genes work. Here's some foods you can start putting on your grocery list. Obviously, if you want to delve much deeper, wait for the book. It's coming.
Very soon.
Of course, for those of you who are super interested and want to spend some really good time, there's a really extensive course we're offering. I'm also going to fine-tune it. Actually, it'll be a much shorter one, because some people give it to me in 3 hours. Just tell me everything I need to know. Other people hey, I'll take a week. So you'll be able to choose.
Awesome. So what puts the I in me's?
The I is this is interesting. The I is influencer ingredients. And these ingredients, many of you listening may have heard of the methylation cycle, and I got the MTHFR, SNP, or whatever. They're a core biochemical cycles. So in our body, our cycles work like gears. One cycle turns and interacts with another cycle, and the teeth of the cycles turn the cycles, kind of like cogs in a wheel, right? And we need nutrients to drive those cycles. Some cycles are more important than others, so the influencing ingredients are instrumental to turning one of the critical cycles, actually three of the critical cycles in the body: folate, methylation, transsulfuration, just so you know. And these cycles are so integral to creating molecules that allow us to detoxify, to break down neurotransmitters, to break down estrogen. We could go on and on and on. So I talk about this obviously in my book and explain it in much more detail, but there are core cycles that we need to drive. Influence the ingredients, provide the nutrients to drive those cycles. So a lot of B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, right? And so if you put some of your eye on the plate, you're going to get the nutrients to support those critical cycles.
We actually just had somebody pop in with a question and was asking, is it okay to have folate, not methylfolate? So we kind of knew this one was going to come up as soon as you said influencer. Yeah.
So listen, this goes back to genomics, all right? And I think Ashley's going to agree with me completely here. We've done a lot of guessing in supplementation. Your genomic blueprint will tell you, what it does is it gives us a signpost as to whether to look and see what basically your folate, B12, and B6 levels are. We look at them, and there's some other variables we look at. My genomics would tell me potentially I might need methylfolate, right? But when I look at all the nutrients around it, the vitamin levels around it, I don't. So there's a lot of, I've got this MTHFR SNP, therefore I need methylcobalamin or methylfolate. You don't until your testing tells you do, right? Don't waste your money. And I think you'd agree, Ashley, there's a lot of blind guessing you need this supplement. Yeah. Genomics tells us where to look. Biomarker testing or labs will validate yes or no. From there, you supplement. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
At that point in time, eat real food.
That's going to be
your labs tell you need a different kind of supplement.
Right. Now, what I often say to people is there's a movement afoot now to just have methyl, and it's getting cheaper to have methylated vitamins. And part of that is also a lot of companies are pulling from food, and so that's also that part is
in that form.
And we've had really crappy forms of folic acid just thrown into everything, especially like our refined grains and stuff like that. So I think if you want to choose it, can afford it, are choosing it. But I think the predominant piece is, one, if you feel like you need to take it, you should get the testing done. And number two, your food sources, you need to make sure you want to get in the quality folate, but also I think your food sources of fortified folic acid are actually the worst choice in that space as compared to any of the other stuff that we're talking about. So that's kind of how I'd round that out.
And that's actually a really good point, because if it's a supplemental form in the food, there's a SNP that actually can prevent you from breaking that form down, transforming that form. So whole food. If you're having it
daily, like you may as well go with whole food, and then if you need something, the supplement form. Now look, if you are and when I say in your food, what's really interesting is it's in things like bars or, as I mentioned, refined grains or kids cereal, young kids cereals, things like that. So again, that's a place where I would say I actually am more concerned about fortification in foods, even though super well intended. I'd rather have people have less of that from a food standpoint and then do the supplement choice that's a better quality. But great question. Thank you for.
It was a very good question, and it reflects where we are in thinking in the marketplace right now, because there's a lot of pressure to have supplements and methylated folate. And you're right, in many of the good supplements now, it's in that form anyway.
It's going that way.
But there's a pushback to that. When I'm thinking through biochemistry, sometimes we can drive a cycle forward, then it comes to a sudden stop. Right?
Yeah.
And so biochemistry, we have to treat it with kid gloves and honor it.
Right.
And that's
and understand it, right? It's kind of like health. We don't get it to just be like, I did that, check, and I'm done. We want to keep evaluating it. So people who, pregnant women, etc., there's more to learn from this. I'm going to move us along because we're going to get through this MEAS. And as I said, I think it's so fascinating. I loved it when I looked at your MEAS where you separated out superfoods. You started off with master ingredients, influencer ingredients, and superfoods. So let's talk about how you're defining superfoods. I think this is
super sweet and short. They're not the latest fad booze. or, you know, something that's coming from some remote zip code in Latin America you'll never see in your store.
Right.
What they are, and this just comes from years of research, is per bite, they contain the highest number of what we call cofactors, so vitamins and minerals. Okay, so again, economically, let's go to economics. If you want to put your money into specific foods that are going to give you the most return on your ingestion, these superfoods came to the top. This is through rigorous research in the USDA Standard Nutrition Reference Database. Why do you need vitamins and minerals? Because for proteins to do their work, they need vitamins and minerals. They're called cofactors. So again, we're all about trying to make food help the body get the best information from food. So superfoods is based purely nutrition science and biochemistry, and it has an economic focus too, right?
It's the nutrient density. So first of all, that is I just heard you say the greatest expression I've ever, or definition of ROI, return on ingestion. I mean, literally, everyone listening right now, please, just make sure you acknowledge Amanda when you say it, Amanda Archibald, but that is fantastic. We should be focused on our return on ingestion.
And I think fits right in your court.
Fits right in there. And I think that, we use the expression a lot, nutrient density. And the only caution that I have there, again, for the individual watching it is what she's really talking about, and you'll see this in the quick start guides. I just highly recommend heading to the genomickitchen.com and grabbing that. And the reason for that is nutrient density is not about what you see on these package labels today where it's like more calcium than this or more than this. And, just companies that are sticking a bunch of ingredients into, both synthetic form and even food form, but, just higher quantities of things. What she's talking about is inherent in, and certainly the soil health and the quality, how something is grown is going to improve its nutrient density. So a great example that I learned the other day is button mushrooms. First of all, you never want to eat them raw. But second of all, when they're exposed to sunlight, they're going to have a higher vitamin D2. But, most button mushrooms are not exposed to sunlight, right? So it's really interesting. You have to actually look, you want to look for, or if you're growing it yourself, shout out to my friends at Back to the Roots. If you're growing your mushrooms, stick them in the sun, so if you happen to have sun, like I'm here in Columbus without much of that right now. But anyway, I had to pause on ROI because it's incredible and we want to just refer on nutrient density. Your E in MEES is like what I feel is 96% of the issue, even though all of these, your M, I, and S all deserve, high attention, etc. But, we're not going to get where we need to go without the E. So talk to me about the E.
The E are the enablers. They enable your body to absorb food. So what they're focused in on is the digestive tract. Right? And this comes very much from functional nutrition or functional medicine, where what we're doing is we're seeding the gut with beneficial bacteria and then we're feeding them. So you know that as probiotic and prebiotic, right? Seed with the right bacteria, feed. How do we do that? We focus in on fermented and cultured foods, depending on the individual intolerance, right? So that's obviously, I'm going to talk about that today. But then there's very specific foods that provide the type of fiber that our beneficial bacteria can ferment. Why is that important? You probably talked about it already many times, Ashley, with your audience, because our gut is the gateway to our health. So by feeding and seeding the gut, first of all, those beneficial bacteria can stave off pathogenic bacteria. They can produce substrates that support the gut wall and prevent invasion, right, or translocation. They can produce something called short-chain fatty acids, which are a fuel, but those fatty acids actually have a way of talking to your genes, too. They can turn on and off appetite mechanisms, hormonal pathways. And of course, this is the area of science that looks at the microbiome. So what we know is a lot of conversations between our bacteria and our genes. Sometimes we don't know. We don't know. We're only just beginning to understand that. So the health of your gut is everything. You are what you absorb, and if you can't absorb nutrients, you don't have the fundamentals to even engage in that food gene conversation.
190%. You can see why I love this. This is like, anyone who's ever heard me, I'm always like, you are not what you eat. You are what you digest and absorb. And now I know it's your ROI, your return on ingestion. So I totally love this piece. So I had somebody and we've got actually two of the questions on here. It's really about how do I actually put this into practice? So if you don't mind using yourself, I mean, I'm happy to share my genetics, but yours. So take us through how somebody actually can go through this experience. Somebody here said, do you need 23andMe? What do you do? And what do I tell my doctor if I want this? All of this stuff. And then take us through to the end, what your plate actually looks like, right?
My plate looks like, okay, so we're not going to talk about my genomics, right? So there's two questions there, if I'm interested, what can I do next?
Exactly.
So, let me see if I can unpack it fast.
Okay.
Certainly you can use 23andMe data, okay? What I will tell you, and Ashley and I were talking about it before the show, is you have to, 23andMe, you get your sort of ancestry data and it'll tell you a couple of predispositions. That's not the work that Ashley and I are talking about here. What we can actually do with 23andMe data is we'll actually upload it to other portals. There are some free, I don't even know what you call them, consolidators or aggregators or whatever you call them.
I used Found My Fitness. I love her.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Right?
Yeah, that's Zonda's.
She did a great job. Yeah.
You can put it through something like Genetic Genie or Prometheus. Here's the thing. You still won't understand what you're looking at.
Right.
You just won't.
Right.
I will tell you that, so there's a couple of routes. If you have 23andMe raw data, it needs to be uploaded to a platform, and actually we can talk about this offline so you can talk to your viewers, where it's actually run through basically an interface where it spits out relevant genes. Mm-hmm. People like myself and Ashley, we are trained, we're able to look at the information, just like looking at computer code, and literally we can run through it and say, this gene affects this pathway, this gene affects this pathway, and we get a picture of the conversation we can have with you. Okay, so you can use 23andMe data, or you can go directly to genomic testing companies, and they will send you a kit, and you can do the swab, and that data is completely in-house. So they own that data with you. It doesn't go anywhere. So there's two routes, and you're more than welcome to email me, folks, or whatever, Ashley, so I can.
Head to the Genomic Kitchen. She will hook you up on that part. So
just contact me through the Genomic Kitchen. We are actually going to be asking. I spent a lot of time getting up to speed with the Genomic Kitchen to develop these tools, the book, the course. We will be opening up this opportunity for you to work with us, because there's basically not enough of us trained to do it, since those that us are, right?
Yes.
This is landshed science. If you are a health optimizer or need solutions, this is like the gateway. So what I would say is, there's a couple of direct-to-consumer testing companies. One of them I really like, but if you really want to get a serious look at your health, you need to be working with a company who can really look at your data and give you a clinical perspective with actionable solutions, right? So that was question number one.
Yeah, if there's one you like, you're fine to mention it. I always like to send people to tools if there's one that you've used that you like and feel comfortable.
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick, because obviously I spend a lot of time talking to companies around the world, looking what's most useful for us clinically as a practitioner, what's most useful for the public. If you're a member of the public and you just want to take a peek, take a peek at your genes and get a report that's useful, American Genomic Solutions is out of Scottsdale, and I'm going to be working with them exactly on this. Basically, they'll give you a report ready to go. It's not going to look deeply into your predispositions for heart disease or diabetes, whatever, but it's going to tell you, hey, you don't convert beta carotene from food really well. You might want to check your vitamin A levels. And that company, it will come with a consult. Okay? So, but don't think of that as clinical. Okay? If you are really looking to health optimize or whatever, these are kind of more B2B companies, so clinician to clinician companies. Nutrition Genome I like. I'm working with a company. I hope they come online real soon in the UK. I'm in the US. Out of Australia, Bioceuticals. They're a supplement company, brilliant genomic testing. They're just not ready for the U.S. market yet, but it's in Australia.
Australia, we're waiting. That's right.
I'm going to Australia.
Yes, exactly.
There's clinical symposium, but I love what they're doing. There's MagGen, Genomic Sciences, but again, what I would do is find a practitioner who knows how to interpret this information. Otherwise, you're like, now I've got this report, I have no idea what to do with it. And that's really when don't waste your money.
Yeah.
If you need help, get a hold of Ashley and myself and let us guide you. If you're going to put the money in it, get the solutions you need.
Great.
All right. What was the other question?
Question number 2 would be like, so when you went through this process and you sort of identified some things, you can talk about yourself, you can talk about a patient, but how did you translate it from like some of the information that you gathered to what you actually put into like the choices that one makes in the day from a food standpoint?
So, so my food choices didn't really change. Probably because MISE is built as a foundation for human health. Now, there was a little bit more nipping and tucking with supplementation. So I have a mutation, a SNP. Yeah, I know. I have a SNP that means when I'm detoxifying estrogen, I can go down a pathway that's not the most beneficial. So we can actually supplement to push it down the right. It's a 2-hydroxy pathway, but part of that pathway requires the active form of CoQ10. It's called ubiquinol. So the body can convert the inactive to the active. The active is what you need to basically prevent oxidative stress and to make sure we metabolize these free radicals appropriately. So I have to take the active form of ubiquinol. It's an expensive form, but guess what? It closes a gate that if it's left over and it's not the greatest, right? So that would be something that I take. But I think, do I have a couple of minutes to share the more profound story? Okay, so
absolutely.
Here's where genomics is so powerful. So my mother had bilateral hip replacement. She tells me I have horrible bones. I don't know what her bones really look like. I've never seen a clinical level. She lives in Spain, so I haven't seen that. But when we did my genomics, it was very, very clear that I needed to be mindful of estrogen metabolism. Okay, am I metabolizing it correctly and support that pathway? But I also was prone to a lot of bone resorption. Like I didn't build bone well and I resorbed it faster. So that balance between osteoblastic and osteoclastic, right? So this is a very, very powerful message. So we looked at that and said, oh, okay, I better go and get a bone mineral density scientist, DEXA, right? It came back awful. I mean, I'm like the TNC scores were like, seriously, even my OBGYN said, Amanda.
You're like, is there Swiss cheese in there or what?
Yeah, right. She just said, this is not so great. So I was in Denver at the time, and one of the key researchers in bone health and bone metabolism happened to be in Denver. And fortunately, my insurance covered it. So I went to see him, and sure enough, he said, we're going to wring your bones inside and out. He ordered labs. I didn't even know what they were.
Oh, wow.
All I know is they were processed at Mayo here in Rochester, Minnesota. And so when I went back to see him, we looked at all my biomarkers, and I was thinking, oh, Lordy, it's not good, right? They were optimal. He said they're above optimal. So he said, here's the message to you.
Yeah.
At age 21, if I'd done a DEXA, it would probably look like it does now. He said, and brilliant clinical medicine. He said, come back next time we do the DEXA scan on my scan, and we'll repeat it on my scan. So keeping the science stable. What it meant, and I presented this in New York at the IHS symposium, we presented this case study, and it meant no additional supplementation because my supplementation was fine, right? Now, I do have SNPs in my vitamin D metabolism, so we did make sure I took the D3K2, so we won't get into that, but it's very specific supplementation. But my bone rebuilding capacity is fine. So can you see how strategic genomics is when you do that? Because if I'd gone in conventional medicine with my Z and T scores just abysmal, I would be on plasma. Hey, you need this.
Or that injection. I just had I've been working with this woman who probably, if we ran her genomics, would come out in the exact same situation where you are. Or close to, and they, somebody wanted to put her on the Fosmax despite her having horrible history of digestive issues. I finally went to war with that and was like, absolutely not. And then we were talking about the injection, and the issue with the injection, there are all of these side effects, and she's 80, it's like this doesn't, I love that part. We have a comment, Suzanne, thanks for watching. She said people don't pay attention to what their body tries to tell you. I think that's really valid. However, I think we're not listening to the signals. Genomics, though, actually helps us understand what our body is telling us. And that's what I've learned from Amanda and through this work is that we really have to have an understanding, and we also need to work with practitioners, like you just mentioned in this story, where somebody's open to saying, let's look deeper, or let's not just look at my symptom and diagnose my symptom.
Right. This created a beautiful circle. I will say, though, that what I really did from that is I really focus, I work with a personal trainer and also a physical therapist to really hone in on strengthening my bones.
Yeah.
So, because, to generate that is osteoblack, you remember which one is which, right?
Right. I know. We're supposed to remember, they're all those, the B, I think B is building and C is, I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I know. I've got those
even
mixed
though
up.
blast sounds like it would be tearing it down. But, interestingly, what you learned, though, because of the estrogen side, so many women are told,
yes.
the probably the bigger danger to your hormones and to your health would be the poor metabolism detoxification of the estrogen, right?
It could be, especially in bone metabolism, because it could block the recycling and the bone matrix formation. So that's important. But a lot of times we're looking at that like this without genomics. Say, we've got to do this. You need hormone replacement therapy, blah, blah, blah. But genomics allows you to look at, well, before we do this, let's see how well you catabolize or break down estrogen, or if your levels are fine anyway. It's
so interesting because I'm probably I confess mea culpa to everyone. I'm so fascinated by and keen on not just broccoli, but in particular glucoraphanin, specifically for metabolism, appropriate metabolism of estrogen and all of these difficult, removal of different difficult toxins. But I never think about that, which is like the glucoraphanin is great, but if you're not doing the ubiquinol with it, and you happen to have the variant that you're talking about, your glucoraphanin probably isn't as effective. So
it is a little bit further up the pathway. I mean, what we try and do is patch it so that it's like you close and open doors to make sure that estrogen doesn't escape over here. And that's why in estrogen metabolism, the influencer ingredients are super, super important because they support the methylation cycle. And what we're doing in that cycle is we're producing these, quote, methyl groups. So it's a compound that is important that activates another compound in the estrogen metabolism cycle called COMT, C-O-M-T. So
I love it. I have to tell you, I think my audience knows, and everyone who's watching this, when you watch it at a better time for you, knows that we could probably go on for 2 hours and just scratch the surface. So if you missed the introduction, or if you forget even by now going through, I just want to remind you, please head over to the Genomic Kitchen. That's where you can find Amanda Archibald RD and her quick start guide. Pretty soon it's going to be her book. So remember, wherever you're watching this right now, if you comment better, until we've given away 10 books, we're going to keep that up there. And please share this also with your practitioner. So if you want to have a conversation, part of the reason that I run this Better Nutrition Expert Interview Series is I'm really trying to, like genomics, I'm trying to help practitioners and their patients talk better to each other. And the way that we do that is start off with it's using the same language. So even for you being able to clarify with your practitioner, I want to talk about my genomics. I'm not talking about my genetics, those kinds of things. And then if you have any interest in what is the right tool for you, if you're a practitioner and you're looking for more information on what are the right tools for your office for doing this, maybe you're looking for continuing education, any of these pieces, please head over to the Genomic Kitchen. You can find them on all of the social media. But I have to tell you, I just love going to your website because the food pictures just make me happy and hungry and satisfied all at one time. So incredible. Whoever does your photography, it's just incredible on that part. And I hope to have you back where we can dive in a little bit further, especially as you get some of these pieces in place. So thank you so much.
You are welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Have a great day, everyone.